Hi, and welcome to Help Nobody Told Me. I'm Shannon Johnson, a local realtor here in the North Chicago area, and I'm with my partner and co-host, Jasmine Shapiro.
Hello.
And our guest today is Rob Nimmer. He is a senior move specialist. What is your actual title?
So I'm a certified senior advisor.
Okay.
So what that means is I help seniors and families find safe and suitable senior living options if living at home is either no longer safe or desirable. That can be anything from independent living, memory care, assisted living, skilled nursing. And I am part of a system called Oasis Senior Advisors. There's 5 of us that are covering the Chicagoland area. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
We're so glad.
And you had a completely different career before you got into this role, right?
I did. So,
Tell us a little about how your journey, what you did in your prior life, and how you got here.
Yeah, I was in advertising and marketing for the bulk of my career. And my journey to this career probably spans about 25 years. Where I was a college kid and moved away from college, and my grandmother's health started declining, and I didn't really realize why the care that she received at back then a nursing home, it didn't sit right with me. It something wasn't right, and she, looking back on it now, there was an obvious dementia diagnosis there that should have been diagnosed, but back then it just wasn't a thing. It was hardening of the arteries, or it was she was just senile, or this is what happens when you get old, and it didn't sit right. And then fast forward 2014, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, and this is where I really realized, for lack of a better way to say it, how broken our system is for seniors, both on the healthcare side and financially.
And unfortunately, that's a common theme that we hear from so many different providers when we sit down and talk.
It is.
And it's sad.
It is sad. And now my mother passed fairly quickly, so I didn't have to go down kind of the long road. But now with my father, his health has been kind of a slower decline over the last 5-6 years. And I'm his primary caregiver. And this is where I really realized how even the difficulty our system is to navigate. I learned the hard way. Now, thankfully, I was referred to Oasis Senior Advisors, and I actually used them as a client to find a community for my father. And, fast forward about 5 years now, he's doing really well. And then I just realized that my passion for senior advocacy just kept growing and growing. And I was helping friends, I was helping family do what, with what I learned, and so they wouldn't have to learn those lessons the hard way. And then when my advisor retired and I found out that this area, the territory was available, it was just a perfect segue to match my professional career with this fire that I have for advocating for seniors.
Wonderful. And we met you at a networking event, and as it turned out, my parents were with me, and there came to a point where it was no longer feasible for them to stay in our home any longer after almost 2 years. And Rob helped us find a place for my mom and dad where they are very happy, and they have a new social circle, and I'm like, well, their social calendar is busier than mine. So they're busy and they are active, and they're safe. They're in a safe environment that is designed for them. And so it was a wonderful experience. And I may put off a decision, but once I make it, it's a done deal. So we didn't spend a lot of time together,
right?
As Rob can tell you. And it's wonderful because what you did is you narrowed it down once you got all the information about my family, and you were able to say, these are the places that I think would best fit for these reasons. And I said, let's go see that one. And we made a decision. I did not waste time. I'm sure that's not always the case.
It's not.
Can we just back up for 1 second? So for our listeners, I'm sure a lot of people like you don't even know that somebody is there to help them in this journey. So how would they even begin if they don't, let's say they're not living in our area, how would they even begin starting this process?
Well, and that's very individualized. The one thing that I shout from the rooftops is have conversations as early as possible. Have conversations when, maybe if you're talking about your parents, if your parents are healthy and active and can participate in that conversation at the time, because we never know what might happen tomorrow. Right. So starting the journey into assisted living is everybody's starting from a different place. And I think the thing that I find most rewarding about what I do is I can help people at wherever they're starting from, but it's ask questions. It's ask anybody who you may have in your life around the healthcare profession, of course, senior advocates, things like that. But for me, being able to get that call, no matter where they are, and a lot of times it's in a hospital stay and discharges in 2 days.
Right, crisis
what do we
mode.
do?
Yeah.
Others, I have clients that are looking for maybe 2-3 years from now.
Okay.
But just start it early when everybody can be involved in that decision. It's so much more impactful and then we're prepared. If there would be something urgent, we're able to understand what we already have kind of talked about and decided.
Well, and if you've made those decisions, you're able to make that move with them instead of, I am making this decision for you.
And like
100%.
you, Shannon, your parents were not on board at the beginning.
Oh, no. Rob can tell you he was there. There was some arms crossed and some clenched teeth, and it was not a happy process.
But I think it's because of their expectations, right? Your mother took in her parents, right?
Yes.
And that was in her mind what was going to happen when she got to that point. So going back to what you're saying is have these conversations and set the stage and and whether it's where they're going to move to or they have a will or a trust. I mean, there's so many aspects of it.
Yes.
When they're in sound mind to be able to have these conversations with the children.
One of the things that I see very often is I think we have powers of attorney. I think they have a will.
Right.
I think. And that is, and it's interesting because the majority of the time I'll work with the children, right? I don't always work directly with the older adult that is looking for a move. And it's a great thing to be able to remind the children, you better do this for yourself too.
Exactly.
This is a sandwich generation. The generation is probably the busiest we've ever been. And we're taking care of our parents. We're taking care of our kids. And we almost a lot of times forget about us. But it is so crucial to have this, powers of attorney that are already designated. And usually there's a family dynamic, and usually it's going to fall to one child, but the team is so important. So even if there isn't, if there's one that is dictating or guiding the process, to be able to have that kind of unified approach with the older adults involved, not them thinking that we're having a decision made for us, and that's crucial.
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of a bias in people's thinking of, oh, I'm going to a nursing home,
or as my mother said, you're going to send me to the old folks home, and I'm like, stop calling it that.
So has it changed a lot in recent years?
It has. So folks of I think our parents' generation are used to what they saw on TV in the 70s and 80s, or maybe what a friend was in, or maybe even a family member. But back then, it was assisted living was not even an industry. Our first licensed assisted living in the country was in the late 80s. So they don't really have that idea of truly what assisted living and memory care can bring.
And so now we don't just have nursing homes. We have, and you mentioned this, independent living, assisted living, memory care. What are some of the different aspects of those different types of facilities?
Yeah, good question. So independent living, these are separate licenses by the state. So, and each kind of licensure really dictates what each of the levels can offer. Independent living is really just that. We're not really talking about help with the activities of daily living, nursing care. We're going to get housekeeping, meals, but it's a home just like anywhere else. Most of the folks in independent living are still driving. They're still very vibrant and active. Once we start needing the help with those activities of daily living, so thinking about dressing, eating, bathing, things like that, that's when we kind of graduate to assisted. Memory care is part of the assisted living licensure, and that is for folks that have a diagnosis of some form of dementia. And that's a whole different programming and a whole different type of care in itself. So even though they're under the same license, they are very, very different in how those are approached. We also have the supportive living program in Illinois, which is assisted living and or memory care, but can transition to Medicaid when funds may run low. Now there's less options, but we're really fortunate in the state of Illinois to have very, very good, nice, and well cared for communities that can accept Medicaid. All states aren't like that, so we are fortunate here. And then we get into more of the skilled side. So we have short-term skilled nursing, which is usually rehab after a hospital stay, something like that. And then long-term, which is based on the acuity of care that they'll need, is going to be dependent if they can go into assisted or skilled. Some of those things to think about are, can they be assisted by one person, for example? If it takes more than one person to assist in a transfer, then that would automatically be a skilled need, with the exception of a few assisted communities in the state of Illinois that have what's called a sheltered care license. It's getting really confusing now because there's so many different ways to go about this, but this is kind of the confusion that is out there.
And that's why you need someone like you to guide you through that process, to narrow the options based on physical and medical needs, based on finance.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
another piece of it that we do have to consider, based on, interests, demographics, all of those kinds of things come into play.
Absolutely. And if we look at the options in the Chicagoland area, for example, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options. So it really becomes daunting. And it's not just, will they be safe and will they get the care that they need? It's more so, what's going to make it a home? What's going to give them the lifestyle? So with my clients, I'll of course look at the health and assistance with the daily living that they need and financial situation, but also geography. Where's the family? Where are their friends? What is acceptable versus what is, if we find a great community, what could we open that up to? But it comes down to hobbies, interests. I've had clients that they just have to have a bridge club, and the thing, So we can, because I think that we're able to see these communities so often, we can get a good feel based on a conversation with the client of where we can narrow that down. Now, I don't ever make recommendations. I will help my clients get the information that they need to make a great decision for their family, and along with, of course, the older adult. But it is all these things, and in certain situations, some are more important than others, where maybe somebody needs a higher level of care, so that safety and that assistance is going to be more important, versus they are socialites, they need a little bit of help, but they want to continue with that active lifestyle. So then the socialization becomes more important. It's a very individualized case.
And people are living longer now. So are more and more communities popping up?
They are, to an extent. We are seeing more, I think, hybrid models that are popping up, where you have some, like for example, some independent living communities that are offering kind of a home care option. Mm-hmm. We're, especially in this area, we are somewhat bounded by the real estate that we have.
Right.
So we need more.
Yes.
We 100% need more. But that
we need more housing too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not seeing a huge rise in the number of communities. What I am seeing is communities adapting to what now the senior population is needing and more so wanting.
Okay.
And that's been helpful.
Yeah.
And what are some red flags that people might need to watch out for when they're visiting potential communities?
Well, and that's an interesting question because there are many, but people really usually make a decision on maybe 1 or 2 visits to a community, and that's what they decide on to spend the rest of their life in. So I think one of the main things that you can look for when you're touring a community is how are the staff interacting with the residents, and not just the sales staff, right? It's notice how are the caregivers, how is the maintenance team, the housekeepers, the dining staff. This can give you a really good, it can give you a really good to peer into what daily life might look like. I think something else that is going to be very important is the details, the cleanliness. Are they, when the activities are scheduled, and you'll see that when you go to any community that have an activity calendar, are they actually doing them?
Right.
You know, I think there is, it's a big money business. And sometimes the drive to make a sale can get in the way of what is truly being needed by that family. Now, I will say most of my community partners are wonderful. They will never put a family into a situation that doesn't work. But when you're going into tour, I think that staff interaction and then those finer details are the things that you can really look for.
And then what are some of the financial considerations families need to be aware of when they're exploring senior living options?
Well, the biggest help nobody told me might be that this isn't covered by Medicare. So most assisted living are going to be private pay communities with the exception of the supportive living program. And you really want to take into consideration your monthly income that you're bringing in, the assets that can supplement if there's a shortfall there, and look at the whole picture, the whole long-term picture, and understand how long the money will last you. Now, that doesn't always mean you have to look at 10, 20 years down the road, but understand what your options are at any particular time. So if we're looking for maybe a little bit more vibrant, socially active community that might be a better fit, if funds will only take us so far, we may need to plan for a move in maybe 4 or 5 years from now, depending. No situation is going to be the same for any family, and those priorities are always different.
Have you noticed any new trends or in the senior living community, things you're starting to see pop up that are benefits to this group of people?
Honestly, I'm loving the trends that I'm seeing in the communities.
Okay.
First off, I will say the activities and the events and the things that are allowing residents to socialize in a really healthy way are expanding better than I've ever seen them. We, excuse me, we think about bingo, right? We think about church services. We think about dining. These are the things that are, I think, come to mind a lot for a lot of people on what a community looks like. And of course, those are important. We love our bingo, but those things, there's so much more. Communities are scheduling regular dances and speakers and live music and things like that. This, I can say, was not the case several years ago.
And you told me happy hour.
Happy hours, absolutely.
Happy hour is a big deal.
Yep.
Don't fool yourself.
Happy hour is a big deal. And then the other trend I'm seeing is really technology. There's a lot of communities are embracing tech to where a lot of their programming can be on like giant touchscreen iPads and tablets. You're seeing streaming, with a lot of the communities have movie theaters in them, and they'll all have Hulu and Netflix and all the streaming services. It's really nice to see that because in a lot of cases, I think we sometimes forget the use of technology and how much our older adults are really into it, and they've really learned, and they don't want to live without it. Mm-hmm. So, and now, especially getting back to our sandwich generation, as we age into the age group that may need communities in the future, it better have Alexa. It better be technologically forward because that's what we're used to.
Smart home, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I saw a TikTok or something the other day, and it was like, what are we going to be listening to in the nursing home when you walk in and the music's playing? Because I walk into my parents' place now, and it's like a little 40s, 50s music going in the background because that's what they grew up with, right? But, I mean, we were listening to Madonna.
We were listening to hip hop. We were listening to
hip-hop,
rap.
right? Thriller and all of these things. Like, you think about the progression of that and what are the music's going to sound like 20 or 30 years from
Absolutely.
now.
And it better be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hear, like,
elevator music.
No.
I mean, now you turn on an oldies station and it's like 90s rock. I'm like,
Stop. Back in the 1900s. No, we're not saying that.
Right.
So let's talk about the emotional experience. Okay, we meet with you, we select a place, get your parents on board, and then how do we help like the families kind of adapt to all of this? Like the parents don't want to feel like you just dropped them off and you've abandoned them.
Right. It's an emotional experience for everybody involved. It really is. Where and I think we all come from it from a different perspective.
Right.
And some of the best advice I could give there is going back to having the conversations early and making a decision together. That can go a long way when it does come to a point where we do need to look at senior living. We know what or what is going to work because we've talked about it already. If that doesn't happen, I think in a lot of cases, some of our older adults are going to be a little bit resistant to leaving home. That's very common. Have the conversation in doses if you can, if there's time. Don't just say, hey, by the way, I think it'd be good for you to look at assisted living communities. Let's go tomorrow. No, it's not going to work well. But having those conversations in small doses, making sure that they feel involved, understanding what is going to excite them and what's going to excite us and the rest of the family and friends. Because that's going to be what I think the reminders need to be, is that they do have these activities and events. Isolation is probably one of, if not the biggest negative health factor as we age. And so many times I've seen very introverted seniors or couples even that don't really do much except watch TV, and that's fine. But now all of a sudden, 3 months later, they're taking part they're never in their apartment. Yeah. They're always taking part in activities. And that's beautiful. That is a wonderful thing to see. The other thing, and I think you alluded to it, is they also may have this idea of what that nursing home was like back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And a lot of times that's where they saw their elderly just being put and forgotten about.
Right.
And helping them understand that our dynamic's not going to change just because you're living in another building. A home is what you make of it.
Right.
And the whole village per se can help with that. Friends, family, that emotional piece is usually out of fear.
And the reality is, once your family members are in a senior living community, you're still involved.
Oh, yeah.
You still get phone calls. There are still things they need from you.
Right.
Especially if they aren't driving, if they're at that point. They need, to get to the doctor's appointments. And you might need to be there to hear what the doctor's saying.
Absolutely.
You're still involved in their day-to-day activities and their day-to-day life. Right. That connection is still going to be there. Yeah. You're not dropping them off.
Yeah. You're
going to get calls from them. You're going to get calls from the facility, especially during that transition as they get comfortable. And it's reality, and they need to understand that. I'm not going anywhere.
I think another big change, you had mentioned apartment, you had mentioned, Shannon, apartment, and that your parents moved into a lovely place.
It's beautiful.
And it's not, I think, the image we have in our mind is like they're going to have a room with a bed. and maybe a nightstand and a dresser.
Oh, no.
No.
It's not like that.
It's
You
not.
really
No.
worked hard with your mom to make her feel like you're going to have all your possessions here.
Yes, we get all your stuff out of storage because they were living with me, and you can have your artwork back and
Yep.
all your favorite things and your bedding and all your stuff is going to be
ordered
there.
some new pieces for them, and you really
Right.
made it so lovely that by the time they moved in, they were excited.
Yeah.
They started to get excited about, oh, okay. Well, when's
Right.
this coming? Or, the last few things. So, yes, and I think that's important.
It is.
That you make it feel like home for them, that it's, you've got their things and their artwork and their
And they have space.
belongings and memories are there with them.
100%. And in a lot of cases, especially with folks that have maybe slowed down, maybe mobility slowed down a little bit, they may have had a larger home, but they're only using a quarter of it.
Right.
So sometimes we have to think about, okay, is this going to be that different than what they are seeing in their own
Right.
home? In some cases it will be. Some cases there's a decent amount of downsizing that needs to
Right.
happen. But making it their own and those special things, one of the biggest pieces of advice I give on the move-in is have it set up first. Even if it's whether the resident is going to be involved in that apartment setup or not, and hopefully they will, but it's almost kind of fun, right? Like,
Right.
packing to leave your home and to move out of a home isn't fun, but unpacking's fun.
Right.
Putting things on walls are fun. Finding
Right.
space for things is fun. And let them be a part of that if that's something that they'd like to do.
Yeah.
And I think another emotional piece to this is as family, we are usually the primary caregivers. And once they go to a community where there's help, there's an emotional toll on the kids because other people are now involved in that care that I
have to
was
let go.
Exactly, and that's hard.
Yeah.
That's very hard. So I think that's something too that it's just open and honest
It's
conversation.
hard, but it's also freeing.
Yes.
And I think that you have to let yourself do that and know that, okay, they are here, they are safe, they are going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you get a little bit of your life back. Myself, having children at home, middle school and high school age children, it was important that we were able to have that family dynamic back.
Right.
And that was big for my kids.
Yeah.
There was some relief on my kids when, they feel like they can have friends over now because grandma and grandpa aren't sitting on the couch all the time. And, there's a dynamic that starts to change and you get a little piece of that back. And I think that's important too.
You do, and that is incredibly important because there's a lot of positive emotions that are a part of all of this.
Right. And you can't feel guilty about that.
No, exactly. And I think one of the things that I've seen most often and it is the relationship between whoever the caregivers were and that resident goes back to what they were. It was, and it's now dad, daughter, mother, son, grandma, grandkid, that these relationships come back versus, caregiver, patient, or whatever you want to call that.
Right.
It's kind of a beautiful thing to watch in time as each of them start really enjoying that piece again.
Right. And it is important. We want to still be able to enjoy our relationships with our loved ones as they age.
Yeah.
And when we become the primary caregiver, it can be very difficult and very taxing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at my mother as this process was happening, and I said, Mom, I've given all that I can give. I don't have anything left to give. You are not getting everything that you need, and I want you to be in a place where you can get that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And that's a realization that I think a lot of us come to. And then there's guilt associated with that, but the reality is that if we are out of love doing the best we can, sometimes it's just not going to be enough to keep our parents, grandparents, whoever it may be, safe and thriving, not just existing.
Right.
And that's where I've seen a lot of wonderful stories where folks are not just existing again, now they're thriving.
Right.
And-
They're getting a
and
little more
it's-
social and
Mm-hmm.
kind of have a piece of their life back.
Yeah. And we want to see that for the people that we love and seniors in general, that they are thriving. And we as individuals, as communities, as a nation, that we're embracing that as our population ages. And we begin to, again, go back to respecting people in that generation and what they still bring to us, because there's still value in their lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important, that we
Well,
still see that.
Rob, we are so thrilled that you were with us today. We hope we'll have you back again.
I would love
with
to.
updated information. We are
Yes.
going to have all your contact information in our show notes. So if any of our listeners want to reach out to you, they will know how to get a hold of you.
Perfect.
So thank you again.
And know that when you reach out to a senior advisor, a senior move manager, and things like that, the services that Rob provides for you through Oasis are free to you.
Absolutely.
You, as the senior, as their family, you're not paying for him to help you. He's paid, he gets paid, but you don't have to worry about that piece of it.
Absolutely.
So
I don't think a lot of people realize that.
I think that's an important piece that we want to make sure we talk about. You're not going to charge, I'm not going to get a bill. Thank you very much. Here's the bill for my services.
You will never get a bill. But the other thing too, as part of that, is that even though we are compensated by communities, we have relationships really with just about all of them.
Yes.
So we can be incredibly unbiased.
Right.
And again, it's not necessarily that we want to make recommendations. We just want to be able to get the information that you need. And it's really hard to get sometimes.
Yeah.
So
It is. It's. I mean, for an individual to gather all that information is exhausting.
Yeah.
Just trying to find 3 or 4
Don't know
communities
where
and
to
make
begin.
appointments. Wait, what?
Yeah.
But you can facilitate that. Let's go do a tour and let's go see some homes and let's get some ideas of what you like and what you don't like.
absolutely.
And you can do that early, as we said.
We can.
So thank you so much.
Thank you both.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. And tune in next week for another episode of Help Nobody Told Me.